site, and she sent me one of your lectures, and I started listening to it. And I said, I know this guy. Where do I know him from? And then I said, oh, well, he's somewhere in Malaysia. And I said, oh, gosh, well, all these memories are a bit ancient for me right now, and they're not really clear. But I did remember your face, and I certainly remembered Brother Yusuf introducing us. But I don't remember much about anything that we did together. I'm sure we had a few conversations and whatnot. And I was with ISTAC, you were with IIUM, and our paths didn't cross that frequently as I remember, but we did meet. And these were formative years, I think, for both of us as converts, if I'm not mistaken. We've traveled a similar path. Amina, are you still with us? My wife. Okay. I don't know if we're being recorded yet or not. Let me.
Oh, it says here that we are. This is being
Recorded.
recorded.
Okay, we are being recorded. Okay, well then that's very good. Thank you. Um, so yeah, we these were formative years for us. So we followed a similar developmental path in our lives, as somebody once called me a convert whose feet are in and out of Islam, which is not necessarily a bad thing. So when and that was in reference to tradition, you see, and this is why I'm interested in getting back in touch with you, as led by Allah now through one of my students, Sister Salma, I think her name was. In any case, this is Salma. I don't know her, but we she often links and clicks and gives me a hands up or whatever on linked when I post something that she likes and admires. In any case, we're both dealing with um, the revision that's going on in Islam, Brother Karim. And it's still a phenomenon which is not, I'm not intimately involved, although I seem to be somehow at the vanguard of this thing in the minds of some people who have marginalized me because of it, you see. And this is an interesting phenomena because, as you say in the one lecture I did listen to or almost half listen to, Islam has been, or the revelation of Islam, if you want to put it that way, uh, has been eclipsed by this tradition, you see. And this is news not to me, not to you, but to many traditionalists, you see. And it's not easy to accept. And if I may, um, just go on a little bit before I hand the floor over to you, dear brother, by way of introduction. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. May it please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us His direction and clarity of thought for the sake of ourselves, our own erudition, our own education, and the education of our listeners. Um, this eclipse, if I can liken it to my own experience as a Catholic, I was brought up Catholic. You know, we were not taught the Bible, we were taught the catechism. And the catechism, as I came to appreciate it over the years, was a, a misrepresentation of actually what was in the Bible. And it, it seemed to characterize a politically correct position. So it was a form of mind control, which I rejected early on, but I could not extricate myself from that position until I actually left and went off to college. at the age of 18 or 19 or so, because I'm surrounded by Catholics, you see, every which way I turn. My parents, my brothers and sisters, 9 siblings there alone, my father's 14 siblings, and all those people who characterized and I lived amongst, they were all Catholic, and they all listened to the priest, and they all went to Holy Communion when they thought they could afford to do so without any serious spiritual repercussions and all this sort of thing. And I rejected all of these things, although as a child, people thought I was going to be a priest because I sang with this heavenly voice, and I had, I don't know, I must have had some sort of light about me, and everybody just thought I was such a holy child, you know. But, when I knelt at the altar, even under the auspices of this catechism, I was very sincere in my faith. I would kneel before the statues and light the candles and burn the incense like everyone else. And um, I was very sincere with this. But the rejection of this tradition caused me to be rejected by that culture. And later, you see, I'm going to advance this tale by 50 years or 40 years or so in Malaysia as a non traditional Muslim convert, you see. I also came to reject this tradition. I said, something's wrong here. And I couldn't put my finger on it because I'm new to Islam. I'm not new to the study of comparative religion. However, I never studied Islam. And the first time I picked up the Quran, 3 days later, after completing my reading of it, I was a Muslim, you see. And this was in the jungle of Borneo. I confessed my Shahada, or whatever you want to call it, in the middle of the jungle to the animals and to the angels and whatever other unseen creatures were in my little jungle house there up in the mountains. So when I came to this position, I said, something's wrong here with the traditional posture. I was reminded of my own rejection by my Catholic culture. You see, I have brothers and sisters who are confirmed Catholics, and they're all convinced that I'm going to hell, you see. And then I found the same reaction, you see, from Muslims and non Muslims, you see, when I converted to Islam, because soon after I converted to Islam, I said, well, this doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. Why are you doing that? I'm asking all these questions, and no one can give me a clear answer. I'm looking for definition. I'm looking for clarity. I'm looking for what um, what's his Professor Alataz called adab. You see, and I couldn't find it. I could not find this clear definition. Everyone was referring to the hadith. Everyone was referring to the tradition. And because of the reference to the tradition rather than to the Quran, I found myself being rejected or questioned. I say, how dare you question it? Well, that was the same thing when I said to the priest or to the nun, how can God be a man? You see, how is this possible? And there's no answer to that. You see, they don't have an answer. You just have to believe. You see, so when I saw this, and then I saw my wife's rejection of me, her family's rejection of me, because they were Christians. When I converted in the jungle, they were Christians, and I was actually teaching in the Christian church there. I was considered a teacher and someone to be respected. I was given the podium on Sundays, this sort of thing, and they all rejected me because I had, and they actually wanted me to leave my house and my home and my family. You see, because I'd become a Muslim, and they had no definition. They did not want to discuss anything. You see, I said I can tell you why I converted, and my wife's brother, who was the man of the family at that time, said we don't want to hear it. We don't want to talk about this. We just want you gone. You see, and I'm getting the equivalent in the Muslim Ummah, they they don't want me gone. They just want me to be like them. You see, and so well, this is irrational. Okay, because I'm trying to think. I'm trying to percolate all these imaginations that run through our minds when you read the scripture, when you read the history, when you look at the symbols, when you look at the analogies that are made within the scripture, when you look at the metaphors, when you compare them to what came before, which is what Quran said it came to complete. You see, the Quran in itself is not complete, not in itself. But if you consider the Quran part of what came before, then it is a completion, you see. And I always said this, and I always got marginalized because of it. And I said, well, my God, these people do not want to study the arcana. They do not want to look at the, seriously look at the locution that is used and was used and is currently used by those who are studying these things in depth. Okay. No, they just want to turn to the hadith. So the hadith has become its own religion, and you must believe in it. You see. Now, let me take this a step further, dear brother. I heard Yusuf, one of the, I've forgotten his name now, his full name. Anyway, one of these modern preachers, it'll come to me in a minute.
Yusuf
He,
Estes, maybe.
You no, not Yusuf Estes is not. Well, I must be using the wrong name. I'm not good with names, and I don't remember them all very well. But I remember concepts. I remember principles. I remember moral precepts. I remember ethical positions, this sort of thing, and I remember the lessons of history. Names I get confused with. Anyway, one of these modern preachers who's very well thought of. He stands on the podiums and holds hands with the Buddhist monks and the Catholic priests,
You
and they
you
want
mean
this perennialist position. Usually, he once said a few years ago. He said, "Well, a large majority, the majority of the hadith are fabricated." He
is
said
that
this in
Hamza?
public.
Is that
Hamza
Hamza?
Yusuf. Yeah, Hamza Yusuf said this. Thank you very much. Hamza Yusuf said this. He made a public statement. A large majority, a large majority of these 500,000 hadith are fabricated. Well, then, sir, as the authority, which ones are true? Will you please tell us? And they don't do this. They give us these, 30 levels of classification, but we don't get to know which ones are completely and totally reliable. Well, you and I, as academics and students of thought, if you will, we can make our own determinations if we want to take the time to try and study 500,000 hadith, which is an impossibility to begin with, which automatically causes one who thinks to reject, you see, this position. Not reject the hadith, but reject that they are revealed knowledge, you see, because they can't possibly be. Anyway, um, if you take that position uh, and then think about, okay, well, please, sir, as the authority, tell us which ones are reliable. Tell us which ones. Give us a book that we can rely on then. They don't do that, you see. Well, why? Why is that? Well, they've established a catechism, you see. If I can go back to my little boy at the idol position, studying the catechism and lighting candles to an idol and asking the idol to give me help, you see. Now that's idolatry, as far as I'm concerned. That's, well, blind faith, okay? And if you want to teach your children that, okay, that's your prerogative, but I'm not going to teach that to my children. I'm not going to teach that position to anyone under my right hand. I'm just not going to do it, sir. Okay. You're free to do that. There's no compulsion in religion. There's no force in religion. So don't force me to take your position, and I won't force you to take mine. So let's just go our way in peace. The problem is that proselytizers for either position, whether you're Catholic or Muslim traditions, they can't leave you in peace. You see, I can leave them in peace, but they won't leave me in peace. So that forces me to break off relationship with them. You see, it's something I don't want to do, but I have to do it because they won't let me alone. It's like it's like the Seventh Day Adventist or the Mormon who knocks on your door. You see, and they say they want to have a cup of coffee with you, but they won't leave for 3 hours unless you kick them out. You see, and they won't leave because they want you to become like them. Okay, well, this is the same position. This is a cultural position. This is a culture. It is not a position of truth. It's a position of a culture. It's a position of belief. It's like it's the same thing. I might as well just be talking to my wife's brother who told me he doesn't want to discuss my rational thinking or the reasons that I converted. He just wants me gone. Okay. He wants me to either return to his fold or he wants me gone. Okay. Well, I can respect him rather than the person who doesn't want to leave me alone. And the traditionals do not want to leave people like me alone. They will then prosecute us. They will then backbite. They will then go online and tell all sorts of things that are uninformed, you see, about you. And this is, well, how shall we say? It's impolite. It's not a correct moral or ethical thing to do. And yet they claim to be Allah's servants. Now, brother, we have a serious problem in the Ummah, and there are students who are looking for relevance. And I'm sure you understand that position. You're still in Malaysia, I understand. And I'm sure the students are still coming to you as they used to come to my door when I was still teaching there. And they would knock on the door and it would kind of be almost be a furtive knock. They want to look down the hallway and see if anybody's looking at them come to talk to Dr. Omar, you see, because they're looking for relevance. I had students who came and sat down with me and said, look, I have to confess this to you. I don't know who else to talk to about it. I was a member of. I went to the madrasa all these years, and I was molested by the teachers there. Not just one, you see. And my sister has been molested by her uncles, you see. And why? How is this Islam, Doctor? Please, how is this Islam that I must go to Jum'ah with them on Friday afternoons and pray behind them? How please. Now, as I begin to talk about this, brother, I'm trying to stop myself from weeping because this is a very serious position. It's a very serious malady. It's sickness. This is a spiritual soul sickness that is rampant throughout the Ummah, all over the world, not just in Malaysia. And the traditionalists do not want to talk about this. It's like the Catholic priests, they don't want to talk about the child molestation that's taking place in their domiciles, in their institutions, and throughout history. They don't want to talk about the babies who were buried between the seminary and the convent that were found in the tunnel during the wars when the bombs opened them up. They don't want to talk about these things. Now, we're not obligated to expose the sins of our brothers and sisters, but we are obligated to speak the truth. And the speaking the truth reveals that sin. And if sin separates you from revelation, it separates you from communication, it separates you from salat, it separates you from the samawat, it separates you from God, then why would you want to avoid it? Why would you not want to be free from this lie? like those students who came and knocked on my door and say, "Why, Dr. Omar? Why? And why do they come to talk to me? I'm the one who's marginalized." You see. Now, dear brother, having given that as an introduction, I think you can now understand why it is that Allah has allowed us to reconvene our relationship and communicate and collaborate for the sake of our students. They're desperately looking for relevance. So tell us, dear brother, how is it that Islam, the truth of revelation, the Al Quran, has been eclipsed by this catechism called tradition?
Yeah, thank you, Brother Omar, for a very fascinating introduction. Actually, it was so interesting. I thought almost I should stay quiet for the rest of the talk and let you speak because it also occurred to me, brother, that you should definitely write your autobiography if you haven't done so already, because your story is just really fascinating. And share your experience with the wider world. Mine is already up there on Amazon, but I think definitely yours is very, very fascinating. So I would definitely say that you should consider that seriously. By the way,
Mm.
I look on the relationship between the Quran and the previous scriptures as well. The way I'd like to put it is that the Quran confirms what came before.
Yes.
Musaddiqul lima bayna yaday, what is between your hands. There are 10 verses that use that expression,
Hmm.
and 10 more
Hmm.
verses that the Torah and the Injil together in the
Hmm.
same verse. And in fact, I remember I first began to think about this relationship between the Quran and the previous revelations because as I was teaching, by the way, it was the University Science Islam Malaysia, the Islamic Science University of Malaysia, where I was
Hmm.
teaching. My students would tell me that because from time to time I would touch on issues relating to Islam, although I was supposed to teach English, but the first 5 or 10 minutes or 5 minutes or so, I would touch on some issues relating to Islam. So in the course of those little introductions, I must have mentioned something that the students came back to me and said, "But Mr. Abdul Karim, don't you know that the Quran abrogated the previous revelations?" And I said,
Hmm. Yes.
"No, I don't know that."
Yes.
And I
Yes. Yes.
told them that, on the contrary, the Quran confirmed the previous revelations. Now, I emphasize the word revelation rather than a scripture because the written scriptures have obviously been tampered with.
Of
So,
course. Yeah.
and here the Quran made also some corrections to the misconceptions that have arisen in relation to the or around the previous scriptures. For
Hmm.
example, the Quran rejects the doctrine of Trinity, the doctrine of vicarious atonement, that
Yes.
Allah has a son, or that
Hmm.
Jesus is Allah, and monasticism, and what have you, maybe half a dozen points
Yes. Of course.
that is are rejected. And in fact, I had a friend from the U.S. He was from, I think, I don't know whether I should identify the location or not. Canaan, Connecticut. I even visited him. He was doing a PhD and MA in religious studies at the University of Toronto's religious studies department, and we would talk from time to time. And he mentioned to me that in his department they had more than 600 different versions of the New Testament, and his
Oh my
job
God.
was I know, and his job was to identify the one correct version by collating them. I said, my God, that, that is a mammoth task,
Yes. Right.
And of course, he couldn't do that. So after finishing
No.
his MA and halfway through his PhD, he just threw in a towel and said, "I've had enough of this. I don't want to repeat his words, but it started with the letters
Mhm.
BS, and he left it
Yes. Yes. Yes.
back
Yes.
to the."
Yes.
So that's about the relationship of the. But that's what kind of started me thinking about this, and I realized that my students were getting this misinformation from their
Yes.
teachers, from the
Hmm.
tradition. People like Ibn
Yes.
Kathir
Yes.
brazenly assert, contrary to the Quran, that the Quran abrogated the previous revelation, which is absolute nonsense. Even
Yes.
Muhammad Asad confirms in his footnote on verse 106 in Surah Al-Baqarah in his translation of the Quran that there's no such thing as abrogation in Islam. And in
Hmm.
fact, he adds that there's not a single hadith in the entire corpus of, the traditions that confirms the doctrine of abrogation. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a concept that we have to reject. And in fact, most contemporary scholars do reject it. I don't know if I can drop a few names. From the old days, there was Abu
Mm-hmm.
Muslim al-Isfahani, who rejected the doctrine of abrogation on the basis of the three verses in Al Quran where Allah Ta'ala says that we will never find a change in His words. Kalim Allah,
Mm-hmm.
they do not change.
Yes.
So that's one thing. Then among the contemporary ulama, we have people like Muhammad Abdul, Rashid Rida, Ismail
Mm-hmm.
Farouqi, Muhammad Asad, Muhammad Ghazali, Fazlur Rahman, who else? Taha Jabir Alwani. All of these people reject the doctrine of abrogation. This is one of the biggest problems, I think, in the scholarly understanding of Islam.
Mm-hmm.
Because the ulama claim, for example, that the verse number 5 in Surah number 9, the so-called sword verse, which says, kill them wherever you find them, which is taken out of context not only by non-Muslims, but even worse, by Muslims themselves. The
Mm-hmm.
ulama claim that this one verse abrogated 120 piece verses of the Quran. This is another astonishing assertion. So
Mm-hmm.
this allegation, the recourse to the doctrine of abrogation, actually facilitated what I call another very major development or very major corruption of our knowledge of Islam, which is that it basically transformed Islam as a religion of peace into Islam as a religion of war, you see. Because
Mm-hmm.
some of the ulama later on, including some leading names, have alleged that based on the doctrine of abrogation, they re-articulated the teaching of jihad, the military part of it. Al Quran allows military jihad only in self-defense and
Yes.
fighting against oppression. But the ulama have transformed this and postulated a doctrine of aggressive or offensive jihad, which is
Mm-hmm.
called jihad al-talab in jurisprudence. And this, they made this into a sixth pillar of Islam and
Mm-hmm.
said that basically Muslims are required to go to war against non-Muslims at least once a year, even when the non-Muslims are not attacking the Muslims. Now, to me, this is an astonishing corruption of the teaching of the Quran. And by the way,
Mm-hmm.
Yusuf al-Qardawi, in a publication of 2009 called Fiqh of Jihad, you can find some interesting book reviews online of this book.
Mm-hmm.
He
Mm-hmm.
basically backpedals on this doctrine of aggressive jihad and basically says that, well, no, Islam doesn't really teach that, but he's very
Mm-hmm.
soft on the traditional ulama,
Mm-hmm.
the militant ulama, basically we could call them, that they are, very, very aggressive, here. They include people like Said Qutb, Maududi, and Ibn Taymiyyah. You see, who all concluded on the basis of those the doctrine of abrogation, and also on the basis of the verse that Allah calls the Muslims the Ummatan Khairan, the best community, because they command what is good and prohibit what is wrong. Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy anil Munkar. So their conclusions actually constitute a non sequitur. They do not follow from those verses, as a number of people show. One name I can mention, his name is Niaz A. Shah, that's Shah, in a paper published by Oxford University Press and also republished by the European Journal of Islamic Law. The name of the paper is Use of Force in Islamic Law. He analyzes these developments, the Jihad al-Talab, and shows basically that it is that was an aberration in Islamic exegesis and jurisprudence. And there's another publication published by the Quilliam Foundation. Adam Dean and Majid Nawaz are the co-editors. The book is called Responding to Takfiri Theology, and it can be found online in PDF format. And the authors are Saleh Ansari and Usama Hassan. They also tackle this issue of the aggressive jihad and show how some of the traditional ulama, and by the way, this was a majority opinion. This
Mm-hmm.
was not a minority opinion. So I'm quite shocked how the ulama, the traditional ulama that are presented to us as these, gentlemanly, fatherly figures who had always our best interest in mind and who were so
Mm-hmm.
knowledgeable. They spent entire
Mm-hmm.
lifetimes studying this, that we do not question what they are telling us.
Mm-hmm.
Even
Mm-hmm.
this when it goes exactly contrary to the teaching of the Quran. So, so much about the doctrine of abrogation. I have a book, by the way, on that. It's on,
Hmm.
also on Amazon. It's called "Does the Final Testament Abrogate the New and Old Testament?" The answer, the short answer, is no. I also have a couple of videos on it. One on my own YouTube channel, and another one I did with James Steid, and I have six
Hmm.
detailed videos on it, about 15 is each, on academia. However, these videos are only available to premium subscribers. So
Sure.
this whole, yeah, this
Yeah,
whole
I
doctrine of
have a
go
section
ahead,
like that also on my website. If I could interject here for just a
go
minute,
ahead, go ahead, brother.
I want to take this idea of aggressive jihad a step further
Yeah,
with respect to the traditional's position, because this is probably a fundamental principle that has been incorporated in their belief system, in their mindset, that permits them to think they can be aggressive towards someone who disagrees with them. You see, and
absolutely.
so this is they think that this is a correct position and that they are defending Islam, when in fact they are standing on a lie to begin with. So this is a very dangerous position, and I think I wanted to bring that out for the students who can comprehend the problem. The concept here is that this is one of the reasons you cannot find the relevance that you're seeking, because these people will not permit it. It's kind of like, you remember, you're a student of philosophy, Brother Karim. So you remember there's a famous statue, or I think it's a painting of Aristotle
Yeah.
placing his hand on the head of Plato. You see,
Oh, really? Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
yeah, this is a form. This is a message. The whole imagery there is one of repression. Let's not listen to Plato. Let's now listen to me. You see, let's not listen to the man who taught me. Listen only to me. You see, because I really understand. You see, so this is um this is this is the traditional position. They want to defend their position, and they're working in error. You see, I'm not saying that Aristotle was wrong with everything. Of course, he wasn't. I mean, he had some really good positions, and of course, Alexander the Great wanted to put him to death for some of his positions, which were actually correct. But to repress reason, individual reason, all right, which we're approaching the concept of ijtihad now, you see. Oh, I'm not permitted to think, you see. You're not permitted to think. No, 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 no. This is contrary to God's signs. How many of these signs are you going to reject? I gave you reason. How are you going to reject this? Well, that's what they're doing. They're rejecting your ability to reason, and they just want you to open the catechism and bow
Yeah.
before their statue. You see, this is a form of idolatry. So and they're being aggressive about it. You see, I'm not aggressive. I just speak the truth, and if you don't want to accept it, that's fine. Just turn me off, or I'll just go home. It doesn't matter. I'll leave you in peace. But they don't want to leave you in peace. So I'm trying to use you, dear brother, to get at this root of aggressiveness. You see, because this is not in defense of Islam. This is in defense of a lie. If
Yes.
we want to perform adab and we want to use our reason to define the position, that's what it appears to be. So
Absolutely.
yes,
Very well said, brother Omar. Actually, yeah. Now, where do I go from here? Yeah, about the word eclipse. Yeah, I
yes,
was surprised you brought that up because that's how my whole journey started, with that single
yes,
word.
yes. Go
And,
ahead.
and the way it happened was that after I finished working with Professor Dr. Muhammad Hashim Kamali, with whom I stayed for almost 10 years, I left at the end of 2017, and I was trying to finish a paper. I believe it was a paper on abrogation, in fact.
Hmm.
And we were on a vacation in Koh Samui, Thailand, where it was a working vacation for me, and I would spend a few hours, in a local Starbucks, writing the stuff down and what have you. But I was struggling with this one question. I knew that something went seriously wrong in Muslim intellectual and political history, but I couldn't put my finger on it. You see, and
Mm-hmm.
that fellow Bernard Lewis wrote an article. It could be even be a book, "What Went Wrong." Now he's some points that are worthy of consideration, but I think the problem goes much deeper than what he touched on. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking about this, and I could feel this that I'm like, trying to find is it here, is it this, is it that. So on after about 3 days or so, I think it was 3 or 4 days, this one word popped into my brain. I think Allah finally had pity on me and popped this word into my brain. And that word was eclipse. I say, oh my God, suddenly
Yes.
every everything became clear, almost like when you are the sky is all like there's fog, right? You cannot see anything, and suddenly the fog is blown away. Now you see the landscape and you see
Yes.
I
Yes.
immediately realized, my God, this is what happened. There was
Yes.
an eclipse. Now
Mm-hmm.
what kind of eclipse was it? It was the eclipse of the Quran, of the light of revelation by the light, or by the moon, by the hadith, you see.
Mm-hmm.
The tradition got between us and the revelation, and it didn't eliminate all the light. It just reduced the amount of light that we are
Yes.
getting. So
Mm-hmm.
now, as you know, the moon is not a source of light itself. It just reflects light, very
Of
poorly at
course. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
if you have a choice walking by moonlight at night or in the daylight, of course you will choose to walk in the daylight. And this is what happened in a Muslim world. So many Muslims are walking by moonlight, by the light of the hadith, the little light that it might be reflecting from the Quran, and they are not really accessing, utilizing the Quran. We have a verse in Al Quran where the Prophet will say on the day of accountability, "Oh my Lord, my people have abandoned this Quran." So there
Yes.
has been a significant abandonment of revelation of the Quran in favor of the hadith or the tradition, you see.
Mm-hmm.
And they are even treated almost as equals. You mentioned Brother Hamza Yusuf earlier, and I remember him saying in two separate videos. In one video, he claims that the mutawatir hadiths are equal. He uses the word equal to the Quran. I said, my
Oh,
God,
yeah.
brother,
That's
where
a
did you
lie.
get that? How can you
That
say that
cannot.
how
Mm-hmm.
can you say the words of a human beings are equal to the words of God? Doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Aren't you coming close to a kind of polytheism, scriptural polytheism, when you make the
Yes.
human beings' words equal to the words of God? In a second video that a friend of mine alerted me to, he went even further. He said there are as many as 500 hadiths that are equal to the Quran. I said, my God, this chap lost it. Actually, I met
Yes.
him. Came to our institute
Mm-hmm.
one time, shook hands, and we
Mm-hmm.
even exchanged a few words across the table. But there were a lot of people, so we didn't have time to talk a whole lot. But anyway, so yeah, this is a huge problem: confusion between hadith and the Quran. And in fact, we have this goes right back. We have a hadith on the website of Ibn Baz. This hadith is well known, and he
Mm-hmm.
quotes it there on his website as follows. He claims that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be on him, allegedly said, I quote, "To the best of my ability, I was given two things, the Quran and something equal to it." The word equal is
Oh.
used. And then in brackets he put hadith, end of quote. So you can find this on the website of Ibn Baz, the chief cleric of Saudi Arabia. He's telling us that
Oh dear. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
so one of my first question was, how could the prophet say that he was given the hadith when the hadiths were not compiled until 200 years after his demise? That's one thing. Another thing is, so you see, the lack of respect for logic, for reason, is
Mm-hmm. Yes.
evident in the way some of these statements are made. Not only that, since I'm on that subject, you will find other statements on his website where he says that we, the Muslim Ummah, have to revere the Sunnah of the Prophet. He uses the
Yes.
word revere. Now,
Mm-hmm.
revere also means worship. Is he
Yes.
asking us to worship the Sunnah? Doesn't
Mm-hmm.
Allah tell us to worship Him and nothing but Him? Yet here
Yes.
Ibn Baz is asking us to worship something else. I
Yes.
mean, I'm shocked. And this is the chief cleric of, is this the best person they can come up with over there? I mean, he has a lot of, and
Mm-hmm.
doesn't stop there. It gets worse. In a couple
Mm-hmm.
of other lines, he says that the great Sahaba used to glorify the Sunnah. He uses the word glorify. My God.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't
mm,
Allah say in the Quran that we should glorify Him? But here Ibn Baz is
mm,
telling us we should glorify something else, the Sunnah. My
yes.
goodness. And then in another
Mm-hmm.
line, he adds that even the great Imams used to glorify the Sunnah. My God,
Mm-hmm.
again.
Mm-hmm.
So this is complete misguidance, and it shows you the shift from the Quran to the Sunnah or the Quran, sorry, the
Mm-hmm.
Sunnah or the Hadith that have taken place in traditional Islam. Now, what gets me is that the Saudis are known as Wahhabis, right? That they are all
Yes, of
about
course.
Tawheed, but the way this
Mm-hmm.
fellow he doesn't sound like a Wahhabi at all. The
Mm-hmm.
Wahhabi, a true Wahhabi would never say what he said just now. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I have read Muhammad Abdul Wahab's book on Tawheed, and quite frankly, I didn't find anything objectionable in it. I was told that it was his followers who twisted his teaching and committed some of the atrocities that happened. The book
Mm-hmm.
emphasizes Tawheed and criticizes shirk or polytheism.
Mm-hmm.
So when I realized that this eclipse transpired, what happened afterwards is that I began to work out in both directions, forward and backwards. Forward to the effects and consequences of this event, and backwards to find out the causes of what caused this event. And
Mm.
in the next stage of my analysis, in a talk I did with Edip Yüksel in one of his meetings, I worked it out to 4 stages. Then,
Okay. Yes.
following that,
I'm interested in these four stages. I think it's a very sophisticated but yet simple um, description of what actually happened in a philosophical frame,
yeah.
within a philosophical framework. Good. It allows you to analyze step by step by step what happened and how we came to appreciate this catechism.
Yeah, yeah. Very briefly, the 4 stages are, and all the stages have to do with the relationship of the reason,
Mm-hmm.
revelation, tradition, and the ulama. So
Yes.
the first stage was the elevation of tradition above reason, or
Mm.
what you can think of it as the repression of reason. And this was done in several ways. This became separate stages in a later analysis, but one way in which reason was repressed was by associating its use to understand the revelation with kufr. I'm not sure if you came across the concept al-fikr kufr. This is a
Mm-hmm.
notion that the very act of thinking could make you could turn you into a kafir or an unbeliever.
Yes, yes. I was impressed when you brought that into the lecture. I That really interested me. Yeah.
And so there's even a couple of hadiths which are quoted to emphasize that so-called reason-based tafsir is considered to be kufr according to the Prophet.
Mm-hmm.
You can
Mm-hmm.
find a reference to this hadith in a paper by Adis Duderija. The paper is called Neo-Salafism, the case of Abu Amin Abdullah Phillips, and the paper is available on academia.
Mm-hmm.
These two hadiths are also cited in a book on the Quran written by Abdullah Said, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So, so in other words, there was a kind of a slender of reason that took place,
Yes.
belittling of reason, and ulama informed us that we have to subordinate reason to tradition, that we have to follow even the weakest hadith, even when it goes against the dictates of reason. Right, so
Mm-hmm.
they're asking us to become unreasonable, so to
Yes.
speak. So in Arabic lexicon is called akal is under nakal. In other words, the
Mm-hmm.
intellect is under the tradition. This to me was a catastrophic development, and the
Yeah.
problem began with this because this had
Mm-hmm.
a number of consequences. So I mean, so that was the first, aberration or anomaly in
Mm-hmm.
methodology of exegesis in
Yes.
traditional, the subordination of reason to tradition, which, by the way, is ironic because reason was used in the first place to authenticate different kind of traditions, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
reason is good enough to authenticate traditions and determine whether this one is Hassan Daif or fabricated, why suddenly are they willing to throw reason or rationality under the bus, so to speak? So anyway, the next stage, the next aberration was the further elevation of tradition of the hadith, this time to a level of equality with the Quran, with revelation, and
Mm-hmm.
this was given expression in the assertion that hadith or the Sunnah are also revelation. You see,
Mm-hmm.
revelation. This gave rise to the concept of wahi ain, or the dual revelation. By the way, Aisha Musa
Hmm.
has a paper on dual revelation on academia.
Hmm.
And this equality, you see, of that hadith I mentioned earlier, where the Prophet allegedly said that I was given the Quran and something equal to it, that is a confirmation of this second stage, the equality, making the Bukhari equal to the Quran. But
Hmm.
it didn't stop there. There was a third, aberration, and once again, it resulted from the further elevation of tradition. This time, above revelation, above the Quran.
Hmm.
So the ulama were
Hmm.
not happy with just making Bukhari and company, and I'm using the word sunnah now in Shafi sense. He made the two of them to be equal, but of course they are different, because the real sunnah of the Prophet was to follow the Quran. In fact, we could say he was the first Quranist, but the
Yes.
Ahlul Sunnah have a very great misunderstanding here. They think that the Sunnah of the Prophet is to follow Bukhari. But did the Prophet follow Bukhari? Of course not. Did he follow his own Sunnah? Of course not. He followed what he was asked to follow, and he was asked to follow the Quran, what was revealed to him. So
Yes.
even the meaning of the word Sunnah has been grossly distorted. Even Al
Mm.
Shafi says that the word hikmah in the Quran means the Sunnah of the Prophet. That is also very problematic, because the word hikmah means wisdom. It does not mean Sunnah. This is
Yes.
really tampering with the meaning of the Arabic language, and we are sometimes reminded by traditional
Yes.
Muslims that we cannot talk about this because our knowledge of Arabic is not good enough. But what about here, when Al Shafi is rendering the word hikmah as the Sunnah? He might perhaps
Yeah.
have benefited from brushing up on his Arabic too. You see.
Yes. Of course.
So why did he do that? I think he did it because he couldn't find any verse in Al Quran to support his idea that we should follow the Sunnah or the Hadith. So he resorted
Hmm.
to this shenanigan, basically, I would say, and
Yes.
try to distort the meaning of this very important Arabic word. But to come back to the third point, the third aberration was the elevation of tradition of the Hadith, or Sunnah in Shafi sense, above the Quran. And this took place in three ways. These also become separate stages in my later analysis. The first stage was to declare that the Sunnah judges the Quran, a Sunnah Qadiya ala Quran. And in fact, I heard this in my first year in the university in 2002, and I was shocked. One of my colleagues said it. So I was thinking,
Hmm.
should I say something or not? It made me feel very uncomfortable, because I said to
Hmm.
myself, how can the Sunnah, the words of human beings, judge the words of God? I was really
Hmm.
puzzled. But maybe it was there was another voice in my brain telling me, "Oh, come on, Abdul Karim, you're the new kid on the block. You're a convert. These guys have been in Islam for so many years. What do you know? And besides,
Yes.
you might not have heard him
Yes.
correctly. So this other voice kind of, I didn't say anything. Okay, I don't know whether I should be ashamed of that or not, but I kept quiet. But
Yes.
as
Hmm.
time went by, I realized that I wasn't alone in thinking this. In
Hmm.
fact, there's a book by Taha Jabir Alwani called, he was chief of the Triple IT Institute, Iraqi scholar, Al Azhar scholar, PhD, known as a neo-traditionalist, but also expressed very serious reservations about this eclipse, although he doesn't use that word. But he does question this idea that Sunnah Qadi ala Quran, that Sunnah judges the Quran. The book is called Reviving the Balance. It was published by Triple IT in 2017, shortly before he passed away. So this is one way in which the hadiths were elevated above the Quran, the Sunnah. And the
Hmm.
second way was when it was alleged, and once again you can find confirmation of this in say Alwani's book, but you can find confirmation of this also in yet another book, which I would even I would recommend even before Alwani's book, and that is the book by Muhammad Shahrur. I'm not sure whether you have come across his book called
Hmm.
Quran, Morality, and Critical Reason, published in 2009 in Damascus, Syria. It was a bestseller, but it really roused the traditional scholars to attempt to rebut him. And there were, I think, about 22 rebuttals written of that book. And but
Hmm.
I would say that's that is the best critique of traditional Islam that I have come across so far.
Hmm.
So, and by the way, the
Hmm.
book is available in English translation. It's the
Is
only
it? Oh, very good.
Yeah, it's the
Yes.
only book that has been translated into English so far. It's available in PDF format, free, and it's called, once again, Quran, Morality and Critical Reason by Muhammad Shahrur. Excellent book. So anyway, so That was the third way in which the Sunnah was elevated above the Quran was when it was alleged that the Sunnah can not only abrogate the Quran, and by the way, the traditional ulama asserted that even a solitary hadith can abrogate a Quranic verse. I was totally
Oh my
shocked.
God.
Exactly. And by the way, brother, this was not a minority opinion. This was the
Oh my
opinion of the
God.
majority. And what
Mhm.
they did further, they said that anyone who does not understand the doctrine of abrogation is not competent to comment on the Quran. Secondly,
Yes.
they also declared that anyone who disagrees with them has left Islam and therefore
Yes.
has to be killed because there's a
Oh
hadith
my
which
God.
says that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my question was: is this how the traditional scholars, arrived at their so-called ijma, the consensus of the community, by threatening to kill any people that don't agree with their misinterpretations of the Quran? I was shocked, really.
Well, this constitutes politically institutionalized evil, as I see it. Um,
Absolutely.
there's no other way to explain that. I hope that phrase rings clear because that's what it is. And Professor Lobachevsky, who you're probably aware of, has written a book on political ponerology. And so this is what happened to the Eastern Bloc in Europe under communism. And it appears that the same thing, the same positioning of the political elite that has justified their authority, if you will, has happened in Islam. And it is a traditional position. Now, let me rephrase that. It's not a position that is traditionally correct or righteous, but it has become part of the rock, if you will, or foundation of the traditionalist authority. Now, not everyone will agree with it, but if you institute a system of thinking that's going to allow you to kill someone who merely disagrees with you, oh my God, this is evil. This is not righteousness.
That's
Yeah,
right.
go on.
It's evil, and in fact, it happened already to Rashad Khalifa, who was killed,
Mm-hmm.
was declared an apostate by 38 wayward ulama, and
Mm-hmm.
who was killed within a year. And there was another Quran-centric person in Bangladesh who disappeared
Mm-hmm.
without a. There was Ahmad Subhi from Egypt had to escape Egypt because there were
Mm-hmm.
some
Mm-hmm.
people after him as well, and I think they
Mm-hmm.
harassed some of his family. Fazlur Rahman also had to escape from Pakistan because the traditionalists.
Fazlur Rahman is the one who woke me up to the political war of the Hadith corpus.
Yeah,
You see, he,
exactly.
he and I when I read that, I wanted to discuss it with my fellows at ISTAC when I was there, and no one wanted to discuss this. They never wanted to talk about the Hadith wars, if you will. It was a
Yeah,
taboo subject.
yeah,
So I really admire Fazlur Rahman. Yes,
yeah.
thank you.
And by the way, Muhammad Shahrur has an excellent explanation of this in chapter
Hmm.
6. His book, the book I mentioned, it's about
Yes.
politics and how this hadith, killing the apostates, was used basically to repress political opposition and to
Yes.
enforce
Yes.
uniformity, on the people. And
Hmm.
he also provides other interesting insights. So
Yes.
then the last, aberration took place in the form of the elevation of something else,
Hmm.
times something else, above both reason and revelation. And now what, and even tradition. Now what was this something else that
Is
was
this the
elevated?
fourth step now? Is
Yeah, fourth
yes.
step, the
Okay.
last
Go
one
on.
of the four big
Hmm.
steps. Not that,
Yes.
so this is a bit condensed, but the detailed
Hmm.
explanation of what you can find in my book called "Is
Hmm.
Islam a Religion or Peace?" There I have altogether 12 steps. It ended up altogether
Oh.
12. Yeah, from 4026. From
Hmm.
4026, and I have a book also called the six waves that transformed the religion of peace into Islamism or
Hmm.
polytheism. So I kept working on it. I realized that I was conflating some events,
Hmm.
so I thought separate them for analytical purposes, and so I
Yes.
ended up 12 altogether. I hope I don't have to add any more. I don't want to make it too complicated. People say you can have something like paralysis from too much analysis. I definitely
Yes. Yes. And this
avoid
is
reaching.
possible. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, the last step was that something else was elevated this time above both reason, revelation, and even tradition. And what was this something else? Well, it was the ulama themselves became
The
the
priesthood. Yeah.
exactly the highest authority, as that fellow from Georgetown University, John Esposito says.
Yeah.
You see the scholars, they said we interpret the hadith. The hadith interpreted the Quran. So in other words, the ijma of the ulama overrules everything.
Yes.
Yeah. Allah ends
Mm-hmm.
up in third place, so to speak, after Sunnah and ulama. And an expression of this attitude can be found in a statement
Mm-hmm.
by one of the Imams, Imam Abul Hasan al Karhi, and I'm quoting
Mm-hmm.
here Al-Wani's book, that's where the quote may be found. He declared
Mm-hmm.
that if anything that we say, he says he was a Hanafite scholar, and this Karhi said that if anyone finds anything in what we say that contradicts the Quran, or then one of the two should be considered abrogated. And guess which
Mm-hmm.
one should be considered abrogated according to them?
Oh, God
the
Almighty.
word, yeah, the
Oh,
words of Allah. So now the ulama can abrogate,
yes.
overrule, cancel the words of their own creator. Now,
Yes.
how? What's the right word? Please help me out. How arrogant? How ignorant? Which is greater?
Arrogant. Eh, Well, ignorance serves arrogance, and arrogance serves evil. So you have a systematic institutionalization of evil that has been governing the ummah for the last 1,000 years at least. So let me let us stop there now, brother, because I don't want to exhaust our listeners,
Sure,
and
sure.
see if we can't take this up again, maybe next week. If you can meet the same time every week, that would be wonderful. If this is a good time, a good hour for you, we've
Yep.
been uninterrupted. I think it's wonderful, and I think our listeners will benefit from such a discussion and from the knowledge that Allah has placed in you with respect to people, places, ideas, things, and all that sort of thing. I would like to review these four steps again as we go on, inshallah, and place them historically in perspective, if we
Yeah.
can do that.
Yeah.
Because I think our listeners will benefit from that, because the historicity of Islam has been distorted by the preoccupation with this classical, grand age, golden age. And it wasn't that golden, and it was certainly grand, but it certainly wasn't golden in terms of true appreciation of revelation. So let me just say that I truly appreciate what you've brought to us, and may it please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to continue, maybe next week, Tuesday evening, the same time, your
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
We'll meet again, and I will make sure that these recordings are properly positioned and edited, and then I'll share them with you. I will post them on whatever sites I have available, and you post them wherever you've got available for the benefit of our listeners and those students who are seeking the truth and are seeking to use their brains properly, and
Yeah.
they're seeking validation. And
Yes.
besides seeking validation, they are seeking relevance.
Yes.
How do we
Absolutely.
make Islam relevant? Well, you're not going to make Islam relevant if you hold on to the traditionalist position, because the traditionalist position is preventing that relevance. It's preventing the
Yeah.
practical application of revelation. That's what
Yeah.
it's doing in preservation of this priesthood. So let's go back again,
Inshallah.
systematically, dear
Yeah.
brother, and
Of course.
trace this history of these four
Yeah.
steps that you've outlined, and without getting too involved with all these 12 steps. You can certainly bring them in the middle as we go along.
In a
But
footnote.
well, listen, brother, in a certain sense, this is kind of, we can call this Muslim Anonymous, okay? We want to talk about 12 steps, okay? Let's just do it. This is Muslim Anonymous. What we're doing is we're revising, helping people to revise their perspective, to get a correct perspective, an in-depth view of what has happened and why it is that Muslims have lost their dominion and in subject and become subject to incoherencies.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
um, I hope and pray that Allah will allow us to
Inshallah.
perform the actions that are in conformity with adab. One of my greatest um, admiration, my greatest admiration extends to Professor Alatas because his work has really defined the many, many problems confronted by the Ummah. And this adab, the definition of things, people, and places, and concepts, and putting them in proper divine order is what has been missing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It has been missing, and yet the ulama claims to have done it, and in fact they haven't. They haven't. They have justified their own position of power and authority over Muslims who are trying to seek this relevance that we're talking about. So, brother, until next week, may God uh, keep you in His refuge.
Yeah. And
Wassalamu
same.
alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And thanks for having me on, brother.
You're welcome.